Welcome to the deep dive. We've sifted through a lot of detailed analysis and clinical data you shared with us, and today we're really going deep on Jasper Therapeutics. That's ticker JSPR.
That's right. And the timing feels pretty critical for them. The sources we looked at paint a picture of a company really at an inflection point, largely because of some recent trial data and, well, their financial footing.
Yeah, it sounds like a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
So our goal here is to cut through the complexity, really understand the science behind what they're doing, break down these latest results, and weigh the potential upside against the, let's be honest, significant risks for anyone thinking about investing.
And crucially, what to watch out for next. What are those key milestones?
Exactly. Think of this as your focus briefing on JSPR. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so baseline. What's the core idea? What is Jasper actually trying to achieve with their main drug candidate, Briquilimab?
Fundamentally, it's about targeting mast cells. These are immune cells, normally helpful, but in certain conditions like chronic hives or asthma, they become major drivers of inflammation and symptoms.
So they're usually good guys, but sometimes they cause the problems.
Precisely. And these mast cells need a specific signal to, well, survive and do their thing. There's a receptor on their surface called KIT.
KIT. Okay.
Right. And a protein called SCF stem cell factor binds to KIT. That binding is like the on switch, the survival signal for the mast cell.
Got it. So Briquilimab messes with that signal.
Exactly. Briquilimab is an antibody, and it's designed to basically sit on that KIT receptor and physically block SCF from binding.
Ah, so it cuts off the lifeline.
That's the concept. No survival signal, and the mast cell undergoes programmed cell death apoptosis. It essentially tells the cell to self-destruct.
Interesting. So it's not like antihistamines that just block the downstream effects after the mast cell releases stuff?
Yeah.
This is trying to get rid of the source.
That's the key difference, yes. The aim is to deplete the actual mast cell population, go upstream. If you remove the source of the inflammation, the potential is for a much more profound and maybe longer-lasting effect.
Okay, and how do we know if it's actually working? Is there like a marker for this?
Yes, and it's a really useful one, tryptase. Tryptase is an enzyme mostly found inside mast cells.
Okay.
So when mast cells are depleted or activated, tryptase gets released or levels just drop overall. Measuring tryptase in the blood gives you a pretty direct indication of the total mast cell load. If Briquilimab's working as intended, you'd expect to see those tryptase levels plummet.
Really low levels.
Often down to undetectable levels, yeah. It's strong confirmation the drug is hitting its target.
All right, that background is crucial.
Mm.
Because the recent news, this is where things get really interesting based on the sources.
Yeah.
The spotlight study in chronic inducible urticaria, CIndU. First off, what exactly is CIndU?
Right, so CIndU isn't the hives that just pop up randomly. These are chronic hives triggered by something specific, a physical stimulus like cold, pressure on the skin, friction.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, things like cold urticaria or symptomatic dermographism, they can be really debilitating, and they're very clearly driven by mast cells.
Okay.
Spotlight tested Briquilimab in these patients.
And the headline result. Because the number reported seems, well, pretty dramatic.
It really was. In the group that got a single 180 milligram dose, they saw a 92% complete response rate.
92%. Complete response.
Meaning, when tested against their specific trigger, 92% of those patients had no hives, zero reaction. And the overall clinical response, including partial responders, was 100%.
That's huge from a single dose in this kind of hard-to-treat condition.
Yeah.
Was it fast-acting?
Very. 66%, two-thirds of patients showed a clinical response by just 2 weeks. Some even saw responses within 1 week.
And did it last? Any sense of durability?
Well, the preliminary look at 8 weeks showed 58% were still maintaining a response. And importantly, 5 patients who had that complete response were still completely hive-free at 8 weeks.
Okay, so encouraging durability from one shot, but suggests you probably need ongoing doses for a chronic thing like this.
Oh, absolutely. That's standard for biologics in chronic diseases. You'd expect repeat dosing, maybe every couple of months. The company's planning for that. But achieving this level of response from a single dose is still very impressive validation.
What makes this CIndU data particularly strong? Was it just patients saying they felt better?
No, and this is a really key point. They used objective tests, Standardized provocation tests, like the temp test for cold triggers or the fric test for friction or pressure.
Ah, so machines measuring the reaction,
Yeah.
not subjective.
Exactly. Getting a 92% complete response rate on those objective measures is powerful stuff. It strongly validates that the drug works, it works fast, and it hits the underlying mechanism. And the tryptase data backed it up perfectly. 83% had their tryptase drop below detectable levels. Deep mast cell depletion confirmed.
Okay, so spotlight CIT and CDO sounds like a home run. Clear validation. But the sources also highlighted some earlier confusion. The Beacon study in chronic spontaneous urticaria, CSU, that data wasn't quite as clear-cut.
Right, and this is something Jasper really needs to address clearly to build back investor confidence. The initial Beacon data in CSU, that's the more common type of chronic hives without a specific trigger, showed something odd. The 120 milligram dose group seemed to perform better than the higher 180 milligram dose group.
That doesn't make sense intuitively. Higher dose should be better, or at least the same, right?
Usually, yes. It created confusion. The company's explanation, which now seems much more plausible after the CIndU results, is that it was likely just statistical noise in a very small patient group.
Small sample size issue.
Small sample size, maybe some variability in who was enrolled. Unlike CIndU with its objective tests, CSU relies more on patient diaries, symptom scores. There's more subjectivity. In a small group, a few unusual responses can really skew the average.
So how does the CIndU data, showing that a 180 milligram dose was so incredibly effective, help make that case?
It provides really strong context. If 180 milligrams can deliver a 92% complete response in an objectively measured mast cell disease like CIndU, it makes it highly unlikely that the 180 milligram dose itself is flawed.
Right. It suggests the drug works powerfully at that dose.
Exactly. It lends a lot of weight to the idea that the weird result in the initial small CSU 180 milligram group was an anomaly specific to that group, maybe patient selection, maybe just random chance. And there's more. The Beacon study also tested a higher 240 milligrams single dose in CSU, and that group. They actually hit a 100% complete response rate at 8 weeks.
Wow. Okay. So you have the 180 milligram working great in CIndU, the 240 milligram working great in CSU.
It makes that initial 180 milligram CSU data point look increasingly like an outlier, not a fundamental problem with the drug or dose response.
That definitely helps clarify things. So what's the plan now for CSU? How do they pick the right dose moving forward?
They're being smart about it, pooling all the data. They'll look at everything together. The CIndU results, the higher dose Beacon results, the 240 milligram and even a 360 milligram cohort, plus data from patients who continued treatment in an open label extension study looking at long-term effects.
Okay, a comprehensive look.
Yeah, using that full data set, they'll pick the single best dose to take into their big Phase 2b trial for CSU, which is meant to support potential registration. Getting that dose selection right is absolutely critical.
Makes sense. Efficacy looks potentially great, especially with the CIndU data. But what about safety? That's always crucial, particularly for a long-term treatment.
Absolutely paramount. And because Briquilimab targets KIT, which is also involved in making blood cells, there is an expected side effect, neutropenia, which is a drop in a type of white blood cell.
Okay, expected. How did that look in the recent CIndU study?
In that 180 milligram CIndU group, about half the patients, 50%, experienced neutropenia. But, and this is important, it was all grade 1 or grade 2, milder grades.
No severe cases in that group.
No grade 3 or higher neutropenia reported in the 180 milligram CIndU cohort. And the company describes these events as generally mild and transient. In the Beacon study, they noted counts recovered between doses. For the Spotlight 180 milligram group, the median time for counts to return to normal was around 16 days.
And did anyone have to stop treatment because of it?
No, crucially, no discontinuations due to neutropenia or any other KIT-related side effects in either study so far. The thinking, or the hypothesis, is that Briquilimab has about a 9-day half-life. That might be short enough to allow the neutrophil precursors in the bone marrow time to recover between doses, preventing the really deep, prolonged drops you might worry about.
So, seems manageable. Now, you mentioned a competitive angle. How does this stack up against Celldex's barzolvolimab, another c-KIT inhibitor?
Right. This is potentially a major differentiator, according to the sources. While the rates of neutropenia seem roughly comparable based on the data out there, Briquilimab has reported 0 cases of hair color changes or skin depigmentation.
0. And the competitor drug.
Barzolvolimab studies have reported those changes, hair lightening, skin patches, losing color, in around 13 to 14% of patients. It's a known effect of blocking SYK because it's also involved in pigment cell development.
Now, that seems like it could be a really big deal for patients, especially for a condition like hives, which isn't life-threatening, but impacts quality of life and appearance.
It absolutely could be. For a chronic therapy, avoiding cosmetic side effects like that could be a significant advantage in patient preference and doctor choice. Now, on the other side, Briquilimab did seem to have a higher rate of taste changes, maybe 16–17% versus less than 10% for barzolvolimab.
Taste changes versus hair skin color changes.
Yeah, most would probably consider the cosmetic changes more bothersome long-term. So overall, the safety looks pretty good in these early studies, manageable neutropenia, and this potentially key advantage on the cosmetic side. More data needed, of course, but promising.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together for you, the listener, maybe considering an investment. We have this really compelling clinical data, especially from CIndU, validating the science, showing strong efficacy, and a potentially better safety profile in one key area. But there's a big but.
A very big but. That's the core tension here. You've got exciting science meeting, frankly, a precarious financial situation. The bear case, the reason the stock is valued so low compared to its potential, and especially compared to Celldex.
Let's hear it. Why the low valuation?
Cash. End of March 2025, they had about $48.8 million. Their quarterly burn rate, how much they're spending, was $21.2 million.
Okay, do the math. That's not a long runway.
Nope. About 7 months of cash from that point. For biotech running multiple expensive trials, that's extremely tight. It means they have to raise money, and soon.
Which, from a low stock price, means dilution for current shareholders.
High dilution, most likely. That risk, that expectation of needing to sell more stock, puts a huge weight on the share price. Plus, there's always execution risk. Can a small company juggle all this? And while the CIndU data helps a lot, they still need to fully erase any doubts from that earlier CSU data with the upcoming results.
Right, so that's the concerning picture. What about the bull case? Why are some analysts putting out these very high price targets, like $30, even $70 a share, compared to the current, $4 or $5?
The bulls are focused almost entirely on the potential of Briquilimab itself. That CIndU data is seen as incredibly strong validation. If the safety advantage, particularly the lack of cosmetic side effects, holds up.
That's a huge competitive edge.
In potentially massive markets, Urticaria is billions, asthma is even bigger. And then there's the valuation gap with Celldex Jasper at maybe $75–85 million market cap, Celldex around $1.4 billion. Bulls see that as a sign Jasper is deeply undervalued if they can just get the funding and execute.
So the drug itself could be worth vastly more than the company's current price tag reflects.
That's the bet. The analysts covering it clearly believe the asset has significant value.
Okay, so it feels like a race against time. Demonstrate the value, secure the cash. What are the key milestones, the catalysts we should be watching for in the second half of 2025?
It's going to be a very busy period. Mid-year, probably Q3, we expect that comprehensive data readout from the Beacon CSU, study the higher doses, the longer-term open-label extension data. That's vital for dose selection and confidence.
Crucial data point. What else?
Also, in the second half of the year, we should get the first look at data from the adhesion study in asthma. Positive results there would be huge, opening up another major market.
Pretty potential expansion.
Then, likely in Q4, assuming things go well, they plan to actually start the big Phase 2B registrational trial in CSU. And hanging over all of this...
A financing.
Exactly. News on how they plan to fund operations beyond that runway. A strategic partnership with a larger pharma company would be the ideal scenario for many investors, brings cash, validation, resources.
Makes sense. And briefly, outside of hives and asthma, any other shots on goal?
They do have the original programs where Briquilimab was being looked at for conditioning before bone marrow transplants, potentially replacing toxic chemo in areas like Fanconi anemia, some early promise there.
But the focus now is clearly
Urticaria and asthma, those are the new-term value drivers. The transplant stuff is probably more of a longer-term partnership opportunity.
Okay, so summing it all up, Jasper Therapeutics. It's a real high-stakes situation.
Absolutely. The recent CIndU data, a major win. It validates the science, looks highly effective, helps explain away prior confusion, and even suggests a key safety advantage. They have strong data to point to.
But they're operating under intense financial pressure. That shirt cash runway looms large.
It does. Success really hinges on two things happening almost simultaneously. Delivering clean, convincing data in the upcoming CSU readouts, and securing the funding or a partner to keep going and advance the programs. It feels quite binary right now.
And the market. Seems like it's currently pricing in that financial risk and maybe some lingering skepticism from the past, much more than the recent positive data or analyst optimism.
That disconnect is definitely there. The scientific validation seems strong recently, but the market cap reflects the significant financial uncertainty. They need to bridge that gap, deliver the data, secure the cash.
So, here's something for you to think about. We've laid out the science, the exciting data, the potential advantages, but also the very real financial cliff and execution hurdles. Can that compelling proof from CIndU really de-risk the much bigger opportunities in CSU and asthma in the eyes of the market and potential partners? And maybe more importantly, can the management team navigate this urgent need for capital effectively, ideally finding a partner, without wiping out too much value for existing shareholders through heavy dilution? As you weigh all this, what blend of that potential high reward versus the undeniable risk feels right for your own investment philosophy?
Definitely a situation to watch closely. A lot could happen in the next 6 months.
It certainly could. All right, that brings us to the end of this deep dive on Jasper Therapeutics. We really hope unpacking these sources was useful for you. If it was, please consider subscribing, giving us a like, and hitting that notification bell so you catch our next exploration of the material you share with us.